The doctor suspected that his wife was cheating on him and decided to install a hidden camera in the bedroom, without imagining that what he was about to discover would leave him deeply shaken. Antonio, a dedicated 54-year-old psychologist, faced another exhausting day of work at a renowned psychiatric clinic. His always intense and challenging routine was driven by the desire to help his patients understand the complexities of their minds. On that particular night, he stayed working late, discussing complicated cases with his colleagues and finishing overdue reports. It was 11 o'clock at night when he finally managed to leave the workplace, carrying with him the hope of making a difference. The way home, normally quiet, was interrupted by chaotic traffic due to an unexpected roadwork on the city's main street, turning what would be a 20-minute journey into an odyssey of over an hour. Exhausted and frustrated, Antonio found himself stuck in traffic, his desire for the comfort of his home growing with each passing minute. After a seemingly endless journey, the doctor finally arrived home. Darkness enveloped his residence, an indication that Janina, his wife, was probably already lying silently in bed. He opened the door, hearing only the soft click of the lock giving way to his touch. A dark corridor stretched out in front of him, illuminated only by the faint light filtering from under the bedroom door. It was then that he heard, for the first time, a soft and almost imperceptible sound of a male laughter. Antonio stopped, his heart racing. As his mind tried to understand what his ears were capturing, he took a step and then another, approaching the bedroom door, from where the sounds were coming. "What's going on here?" he murmured to himself, incredulous. A man's voice, clear and cheerful, now mingled with that of a woman, not just any woman, but his wife. "Come here, my sweetheart," the male voice called. It can't be, he thought, but as he approached, the sounds became unmistakable: laughter, conversations, and the intimacy of a shared moment. "My husband will never find out about us, my love," Janina said, full of a brazenness that pierced Antonio's heart like a cold blade. Anger consumed a storm boiling in his chest, driving him to act with firm and determined steps. The psychologist advanced to the bedroom door and, in a gesture of pure fury, abruptly opened it, already shouting, "Congratulations, Janina." He shouted, ready to face the betrayal unfolding before his eyes, but what he found made him stop abruptly. The room was enveloped in darkness. Only the outline of the bed was perceptible under the weak light of the street lamps, and his wife was there, seeming to be in a deep sleep. There were no traces of any other presence, no sign of the male voice he was sure he had heard. Perplexed, Antonio stood still, trying to understand the scene before him. Janina, awakened by her husband's sudden shout, rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked at him confused. "What happened, honey? Why are you shouting?" she asked, her voice laden with sleep and surprise, completely unaware of the storm of emotions that was engulfing Antonio at that moment. Still affected by the confusion and adrenaline, he looked at his wife, who struggled to keep her eyes open from exhaustion, and wished to return to her previous state of sleep. The moment of tension seemed to dissipate, replaced by an uncertain calm. With a soft voice, still trembling with emotions, the doctor spoke. "I'm sorry for waking you up, my love. You have to work early tomorrow and I didn't want to disturb your sleep. I just got confused." He let his words fade into the silence of the room, an apology that carried more than just the discomfort of waking her up. It was a request for having doubted, even momentarily, the integrity of the woman with whom he shared his life. Janina murmured something unintelligible, a response still shrouded in sleep, before turning comfortably and getting lost again in the peace of her dreams. Still dressed in his psychiatric hospital uniform, Antonio felt an overwhelming need to rid himself of the weight of the day. "Sweetheart, I'll take a shower and then come to bed," he said, more to himself than to her, as if promising to try to leave behind the shadows of doubt brought by the night. The path to the bathroom seemed longer than usual, and each step resonated with the thoughts swirling in his head. The hot water from the shower fell on him like a mantle, as if each drop tried to cleanse not only the physical tiredness but also the certainties that troubled him. I'm sure I heard her speaking. Am I going crazy? The question repeated in his mind like an insistent melody that refused to be silenced by the sound of the water. Logic fought against emotion, reason tried to assert itself over intuition. It must be just exhaustion, that's it, he tried to convince himself. After all, the day had been particularly exhausting, full of challenges that demanded not only his professional expertise but also an extra dose of empathy and patience. Today was an intense day, I must be hallucinating. This conclusion seemed to bring some comfort, a plausible excuse for what would otherwise be inexplicable. Perhaps exhaustion had played a trick on him, making him hear voices where there were none, creating shadows where only the light of love and trust existed. After the bath, enveloped in a sense of calmness, Antonio returned to the bedroom, moving silently so as not to disturb his wife's peaceful sleep. He lay down on the bed, curling up beside her, in a comforting embrace. In that proximity, he let sleep envelop him, offering him a welcome escape from the doubts that haunted him, knowing that the next day would bring another arduous day of work as a psychologist. However, strange things began to happen in the following days. It seemed that each day brought a sequence of events that defied any logic or rational explanation. Exhausted after long hours devoted to his patients, Antonio always returned home in search of refuge and comfort. However, what he found was a reality that disturbed his peace and stirred up the turbulent waters of his marriage. Every night, like an unshakable cycle, the voice of a man echoed through the corridors of his house, filtering through the cracks of the doctor's reality, almost mockingly. "My princess, come here and give me a kiss," the man would say. Moved by a mixture of anger and despair, the psychologist would open the bedroom door with a pounding heart, only to find Janina alone. Sometimes she would be there, serenely absorbed in her nighttime readings or lost in the luminous screen of her cell phone. He couldn't bear it anymore. On one of those occasions, seized by an urgent desperation, Antonio searched the room for the man he believed he heard. He looked under the bed, inspected inside the closet, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, in search of an intruder who never appeared. "What are you doing?" his wife, Janina, asked. "Where is he?" The question escaped his lips, tinged with growing anguish, as the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with a somber weight. Confusion and suspicion intertwined in his mind, weaving a web that threatened to suffocate him. Antonio and Janina's marriage, already marked by storms and misunderstandings, was now in a state of accelerated deterioration. Arguments became constant, and misunderstandings an inevitable occurrence. To make matters worse, she began arriving home late, sometimes enveloped in the woody aroma, triggering an explosion of accusations and recriminations from Antonio. "Why do you smell like that? Are you cheating on me, aren't you?" Antonio shouted with his voice filled with firm conviction. "You're becoming crazier by the day," she retorted defensively. Her words echoed, however, in the depths of his soul. The doctor had an unwavering certainty that something was wrong. "She's hiding something from me, I'm sure of it, and I'll find out what it is." The woman always claimed he was going crazy, and that was the last straw. Feeling cornered and disbelieved in his own home, Antonio decided to act. Tired of being called crazy by his wife, he had an idea that would change everything. The next day, determined to solve the mystery that disturbed the peace of his home and on the brink of collapse for not knowing where the man his wife hid was, Antonio went to an electronics store in the early hours of the morning. His steps were firm, and every movement reflected the irrevocable decision he had made. As he walked through the aisles filled with devices and technological solutions, his gaze fixed on his goal, a hidden camera, small enough to go unnoticed, yet powerful enough to capture the truth he so eagerly sought to reveal. After acquiring the device, the man quickly organized the installation, with an urgency he could barely contain. He explained to the installer the importance of being discreet and fast. "I need this to stay between us," he emphasized seriously, making it clear that there was no room for errors or delays. The professional, understanding the delicacy of the situation, acted efficiently, installing the camera in the couple's bedroom so that it remained hidden from inattentive eyes. Obviously, his wife had already left for work when the service was completed, leaving him in the residence with a heart oppressed by anxiety and anticipation. The man also went to his shift at the clinic, which normally served as a welcome distraction from his personal problems. On that day, there was only one obstacle between him and the answers he sought. Throughout the day, he couldn't disconnect from the events in his house. "Today I will find out about you and that man," he repeated to himself like a mantra that kept him focused despite the whirlwind of emotions consuming him. The idea of finally having the necessary evidence to confront the situation that tormented him so much with irrefutable facts was, at the same time, terrifying and intensely desired. "That woman will pay a high price," he said, feeling as if his chest was boiling every passing minute. A mixture of fear, hope, and fierce determination tormented him. Every case he attended to and every patient he helped served only as a reminder of the role he played in his life, a seeker of truth, someone dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of the human mind. And now, this search for truth extended to his own home, his personal life, where the most disturbing mystery of all awaited revelation. "I can't take it anymore. I'm eager to get back home and review the recordings. Today he won't escape." This thought dominated every second of his shift, like an incessant flame guiding him through the hours until he could finally confront what the hidden camera had recorded. And so, at 11 p.m., the time finally came to leave. Antonio, with his heart beating to the rhythm of the anxiety consuming him, rushed home. At night, already part of his routine of mysteries and suspicions, he was greeted with the echo of the same male voice that seemed to emerge from the depths of his room. Without hesitation, he invaded the space with determination and anger, shouting the words that exploded from his lips. "Where is that man, Janina?" he shouted with a voice laden with an almost tangible despair. Not seeing the man, Janina, obviously sitting on the bed with an expression of perplexity that quickly turned into frustration, replied again, "There's no one here. I've told you 1,000 times." The incredulity in her voice only fueled her husband's fury, who, armed with the certainty of his suspicions, pointed to the small object that promised to reveal the truth. "I have proof. You see. There's a camera there, and I'll see the images. I want to see where that scoundrel you're sleeping with is." The doctor's words cut through the air, each syllable imbued with a challenge he was determined to win. His wife, in a desperate attempt to interrupt what would follow, got up running and begged him to change his mind, her pleas forming an audible trail that he ignored as he headed to the laptop. "Today I will prove this betrayal," Antonio thought, as he heavily turned his fingers, trying to start the recording quickly. The expectation grew like a monster feeding on every second of silence before pressing play. And then, the images began to come together, spinning a window to the truth that Antonio sought so much. But then, how is this possible? What his eyes saw left him paralyzed. A shiver of terror ran down his spine. He knew what was in those recordings. There was no one else in that room besides himself, shouting into the void, confronting someone who didn't exist. Reality, so solid and indisputable, began to crumble like sand between his fingers. His mind was in a whirlwind of confusion and denial, struggling to cling to any vestige of normality. The truth hit him like a lightning bolt. Antonio was completely alone, the living room, the bedroom, the house, all empty except for his solitary presence. He looked around searching for his wife, but she wasn't there. It was at that moment that long-repressed memories began to infiltrate his consciousness, bringing to light a reality that his heart refused to accept. Janina, his beloved wife, had passed away over 10 years ago. Throughout all that time, he had only imagined her presence, in a desperate denial to accept this devastating truth. The doctor began to shout, his voice echoing through the empty walls of his house. "No, no, it can't be, Janaina." Each call for her name was a plea for reality to bend, a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. As Antonio's cries filled the air, a cacophony of voices began to emerge from the void, words that seemed to come from afar but gradually became clearer and more insistent. "My God, Antonio, wake up, pass me the defibrillator now." An urgent voice echoed, imbued with an authority born of concern and professionalism, fighting against the haze enveloping his consciousness. The man forced his eyes to open, finding himself surrounded not by the darkness of his room as he thought he was dreaming, but by the sterile white light and worried faces of white-clad nurses. They held him gently but firmly, a sea of concern trying to anchor him to reality. "Stay calm, everything's okay," one of them said, trying to convey a tranquility that the doctor felt was lacking in every fiber of his being. "Where is Janaina?" The question came out weakly like a thread of voice desperately seeking answers. In this uncertain world, they exchanged meaningful glances. "Again, we need to warn the doctor," they said, concluding that it would be necessary to increase his sessions with Dr. Noguera, his psychologist. It was then, with delicacy and hesitation, that the nurses began to reveal to Antonio the truth he resisted accepting, a reality so bleak that it threatened to shatter what remained of his sanity. Background: Antonio was once a renowned psychologist and had seemingly lived a happy marriage with Janaina since they were 20. However, about 10 years ago, a catastrophic event changed the course of his life forever. He caught his wife cheating, came home to hear her voices with another man in their bedroom, finding them together in bed, a scene that not only shattered his heart but also the reality he knew. Consumed by uncontrollable rage, Antonio left home, but the hatred boiling inside him brought him back, resulting in an unthinkable act. In a moment of desperation and revenge, he tampered with Janaina's car brakes. Tragically, as she attempted to drive her lover, the brakes failed at a curve, resulting in a fatal accident that sent them tumbling down a ravine. The news of Janaina's death, caused by her own hands, pushed the doctor into an abyss of madness and despair. Unable to cope with the guilt and loss, he plunged into such a severe psychological state that he was admitted to the clinic where he worked. Since that day, 10 years have passed, battling hallucinations that always transported him back to that day, where he relentlessly relived the moment of betrayal. Now it was clear that Antonio would continue trapped in this cycle of guilt and delirium, condemned to remain under medical care for the rest of his days, sealed by the shadow of his past actions. He was now adrift in a sea of despair and madness, a prisoner of his own self, now and forever. Alright, folks, if you enjoyed this story, surely the next video popping up on your screen will also move you. Oh, and don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends and family. See you soon, big hugs, and until the next story.